G'day humans, Chris Stead here. Today I'm reviewing the ASUS ROG Ally. The ROG standing for Republic of Gamers, part of the ASUS family. You've probably seen the laptops, also phones that have ROG branding. This is the Ally. Now this is basically, you can think of this as like turning your PC desktop into a handheld device, like basically a PC desktop as if it was a Switch. Now the concept of this kind of handheld PC gaming experience has been popularized by Valve with its Steam Deck, but the Steam Deck's not available here in Australia. And there are kind of quite a few players that have now entered that scene or are going to enter that scene. But the ASUS ROG Ally stands out because ASUS in general makes really quality products, especially in its ROG range. In fact, the new Ultimate 07 ROG phone is an absolute beauty. So this one absolutely stands out. But when it launched, which was just over a month ago from when I'm doing this review now, it had mixed reviews, it's fair to say. So basically, the main issue that people have with it is that the hardware kind of gets in the way of the software too much. And there's some battery life concerns I'll go into. But anyway, it's now over a month later, about 5 weeks since it's been launched. There's been a number of updates to the firmware since then. So I'm going to take it for a bit of a run and give you my thoughts on what I think of the ASUS ROG Ally and whether or not it's a good purchase for you. So, well, first, let's just start off with the price. Now, this puppy is $12.99 here in Australia. This is the Extreme, there's a ASUS ROG Ally Extreme Z1. This is that model. It's slightly bumped up from the base model in that you get 16 gigabytes of RAM instead of 8 gigabytes, and you get 512 gigabytes of storage on its M2 NVMe PCIe 4 Gen 4 SSD card that's inside there. So that's what you get a bit of a bump up here in Australia, which is great. And that's the main difference, as you can expect, between the Extreme model and the basic model, Extreme Z1 and the basic model. But to go into the other kind of specifications, if you actually put this side by side just on paper with the Steam Deck, this absolutely blows it away for specifications. So what you can expect is an AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor, Zen 4 architecture with 8 cores and 16 threads, 24 megabyte total cache, and up to a 5.10 gigahertz boost on the CPU, that is. With the GPU, looking at 4 gigabytes GPU running at 2.7 gigahertz. Now that's about the same as an NVIDIA GTX 1650 if you wanted to try and find something in that range to compare it to. The touchscreen is 1080p, 7 inches, 500 nits of brightness. It runs at 120 hertz too, which is good, but has a 7 millisecond response time, which isn't that flash, especially compared to the latest game monitors. There's an audio jack where you can just connect through Bluetooth 5.2. It also runs at Wi-Fi 6E, which is really, really good, I think. It has the ROG XG mobile interface port. I'll go into that a little bit later, as well as the Armoury Crate app, which is kind of across the ROG range with the phones and that. You've got some HD haptics involved. You've got 6-axis motion controls, Dolby Atmos with AI noise cancelling technology. So there's a built-in array microphone and 2-speaker system with smart amplifier technology. The Soundness is fantastic. I'll go into that in a little bit later. And the battery gives you about 40 watt hours of runtime. And it weighs about 608 grams, so it's not too bad. The weight of it doesn't feel too bad at all. It's a little bit heavier than like a normal controller, but I was playing this last night, kind of lying on my back, holding it in my ear for the best part of an hour, and I had no complaints with that, so the weight's pretty good as well. Now let's jump into the design, because I think the aesthetic of this thing is actually really, really lovely. If you're familiar with the ASUS range of products, you'll see a lot of the similarities here in the design. It all looks much like other ROG designs here. I love the way that they do the speakers, it's really, really cool. And the vents for this, sorry, these are the air vents. It's the fan on this isn't very loud. I haven't seen it kick in. I haven't felt it get hot at all, actually. So they've done a really good job dissipating, getting the heat out of here and everything like that. Now you can see here, you've got the ROG XG mobile interface. I'm not sure if you can make that out. And this is a whole separate thing. It basically allows you to plug in a separate GPU and power source and port device if you want to give this basically a boost. So most people aren't going to have that, but it does have access to it. You got your micro SD here as well. You got a full array of mic in there as well, and your volume. I won't turn it up because it's so loud. Nice cushion sides here on both sides for your hands, kind of fit in it really, really well. Obviously you can see the lighting effects here, which I love. The buttons, the sticks are really nice and robust. Maybe I'm getting lapped. and typical of what you might experience with an Xbox controller before in the past. So that's all really good. It's not particularly, it doesn't feel very expensive in the way it's been made. It reminds me actually kind of the Atari Lynx or Sega Game Gear, that kind of era there, where everything kind of feels a bit more plastically and light. If you compare it with say the Switch, for example, which is a much smaller device, but just feels denser and it feels more expensive as a result. And so I do wish it just felt a bit more like its actual cost. And it doesn't come with any sort of case as well, which is a bit of a shame considering how much this costs and how delicate parts of the buttons are. I would have liked to have seen this come with a protective case of some sort at that price point, just to allow you to just transport it with a bit more ease. It is obviously a portable device. They're not adaptive triggers like you find in PlayStation, but when I was playing, for example, this game here, which is F123, which has just come out this week, that's why I chose it, you've got pretty good control here with your acceleration and your brake. Better turn or I'm going to go crashing. So that's a pretty good, I think the design is fine and it's good and it's nice and light. It's just kind of elsewhere that it has a bit of struggles. Now, if there's one thing I don't really like about the design, it's this, the power cord that's used. So as you can see here, it's not just a standard USB-C power in. In fact, if you stick a USB cable into it as you would with your phone, for example, or even a Switch, it doesn't power. You need to run it off this thing, so it just makes it a little bit more awkward. I'm not sure what they could have done about that in terms of the design, but that is a bit of a bummer for me. Now, let's talk about the UI. So the UI here is Windows 11. And when I first turned this on and opened it up, and it burst up and it just opened up with my Windows screen, like it synced up with my account and it came Windows 11, I was like, oh wow, this is really, really cool. All of a sudden I've got access to my Windows desktop experience right here on this screen handheld, right? But it doesn't really kind of work the way you'd think. In fact, in the end, I found dealing with Windows 11 on this size screen quite challenging. I'm 44, so my eyes were really struggling to deal with kind of just trying to see where everything was and deal with it. And I realized you can kind of play around with the settings, but you gotta be able to see it to do that to begin with. There's nothing in the startup process that allows you to kind of like zoom in and just bring it up to wherever you happen to be with your eyesight. And I was wearing glasses at the time, mind you, as well. So that kind of comes into it as well, but also, yeah, it's cool to be able to open a browser and do all your browsing stuff, and you can even type on here if you want to with a Bluetooth keyboard in Word, or anything you do with a PC you can do on this. You can log into Disney and watch Disney, whatever it happens to be. But really, you're here to play games. And when you switch over kind of to the Armoury Crate app and into the actual ROG kind of UI part of things, the device is just much more easier to use and elegant. So even though I really like the flexibility that the Windows 11 offers when you're using the ROG Ally, it actually kind of gets in the way. And I think ASUS would have done better if they had gone first with their UI and then had an option to kind of go back to Windows 11. So they do have, they've tried to do that. Like you can press this button on the side here and get a command center that allows you to kind of switch to desktop or change various settings. You can just jump straight into the crate with this button, and in there it shows you kind of all the services you've got. So I've got Steam there, I've got Xbox Game Pass there, got Epic Games Launcher, Ubisoft Connect, then I've got the games as well, just jump straight into the games. It's just apps. When you're kind of in there and it's built for touch very specifically, it's big, it's easy to see, the UI works. But as soon as you're trying to then pops you out to Windows 11, which bloody PCs do all the same, all the time. So when I went to play Assassin's Creed, I had to go to Ubisoft Connect. When I wanted to go to Bethesda and play Doom, I had to log out and go to the Bethesda login. And so it keeps flipping you out of the cool, smart ASUS UI part of this device back to the Windows part to kind of make the two connect. And that is where the device really started to fall down from a user-friendly experience for me, is that I wanted it to be kind of together. I would have preferred in the end to have not had Windows 11 there at all, and to have just been existing through this ASUS app and everything to kind of be through that. But it's kind of chops and changes you out. So that's kind of where the UI of this kind of thing starts to fall down a bit. Now, obviously we're here to play games, so let's talk about the actual performance of this thing. Now, this is where people have really got stuck up on those early reviews, is where the performance becomes a problem. Now, there's two parts to the experience here that really kind of define it. And like I said, this is over a month later since launch. There's been a few firmware updates. I did notice an improvement because I was using it between the updates. It's like it kind of updates and you come back in, use it for a bit, then it goes, hey, there's another update. So it's done it a couple of times to me that I've kind of caught up to speed. And with each update, I definitely noticed an improvement in the performance, but the performance is still super clunky. And I'd say it's more clunky than buggy, even though I've had a couple of freezes I've had to jump out a little bit, but I don't think it's because necessarily it's freaking out. I think it's because the UI between what ASUS is trying to do and then what Windows is trying to do, like I said, it just keeps trying to flip between the two, and that keeps struggling with that element more than anything, I think. So the process of getting in, like downloading a game, getting the game on, logging into your accounts, turning the game to actually start, that's the clunky bit, and that's where you get frustrated. And I sweared at this thing a couple of times in that process because I was just like, man, this is just like really frustrating me now. But then you get into the game and you're like, wow, and it looks fantastic. This screen looks fantastic. The audio that comes out of this thing is amazing. Really, really good. You get the full kind of, it's only these two speakers here, but the stereo effect it gets from it, you know, like I was playing Stray, you know, that fantastic indie game with the cat, which is really atmospheric. And I was standing there, the waterfall's coming down. As I'm turning kind of around, you know, the waterfall, I could hear it going around my head just from these two speakers. I was playing F123, for example, just to see how it moved under that fast motion of racing. And, you know, just having the cars go, wow, past your ears, that kind of side of things, you know, was really, really good experience. It looks great. For the most part, it ran great. It's not buttery smooth. I'd never go as far as to say it's buttery smooth. I don't know if it's because of the 7-millisecond response time, whether the software is not quite reaching that 120 hertz frequently enough. Could be a bit of the drama, or whether it's just capping a little bit in the background, I'm not sure. I'd say the GPU, obviously, it's not frigging phenomenal, so that could be also doing it a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's smooth, but it's more than playable. I only noticed a couple of times in the frames just caught on me a little bit, you know, like here and there, but I wouldn't say it's still perfectly playable and enjoyable experience. It's just kind of dealing with that a bit before you get into the game, which is the most challenging part. Once you're actually in the game, it's really, really good fun, and it plays really well, it looks great, sounds great, and the controls and the buttons and everything work as you would like. There's no haptic feedback, there's no rumble or anything like that involved, which is a bit of a bummer, but I can kind of understand it because the battery on this thing is an issue. So, like I said, you can't just charge it with a USB-C. So for me, a use case for this absolutely is on long trips with the kids. I'd be like, yo, play something on Steam or whatever, just play a game. Not gonna last you very long. I was playing Stray last night, lying in bed, and it was at 93% when I turned the game on. I played for a bit less than an hour and it was at 23% after that. So that gives you a bit of an idea. Depending on what you're playing, how much you're playing it, how much it's demanding of the actual CPU and components inside. Obviously your battery's going to change, but an hour and a half maybe is where you're going to start capping out. If you're getting past 2 hours, I think you're doing pretty bloody well if you've been playing games the entire time. And that's, you know, a bit of a concern. Like, that's really starting to push it down to niche territory, because there's a lot of time you have to spend with this thing plugged in, and it's not the most elegant or speediest of charging experiences either. So that's something you've got to take into account. Ultimately, the ROG Ally's big issue is that it's a first generation attempt at something that's actually really quite cool. And that's just a pill that early adopters are going to have to swallow if you want to pick up one of these devices. I enjoyed playing it, and when it hits its potential, it's really awesome. But when it doesn't hit its potential, it's a frustration. And that's kind of to do with the UI and to a lesser extent the battery life just not being where it needs to be, especially at this kind of price point, because it is at a premium price point, I think, and you're really getting a work in progress at that price point. One day there's going to be an Ally 2 and we're going to look at this and kind of go, wow, okay, this is what it was, and we now understand that. But right now, if you're going to jump into this, that is something you definitely have to think about. Just because we're comparing options here in the market, I've got 3 other things here to show you. So this here is the Switch, Nintendo Switch. Just to give you an idea of the size difference there and what you're looking at between these two devices. Now this is obviously a fair bit cheaper, in fact less than half the price of this device here, much longer battery life, still an awesome run of video game options, more kiddie centric. You don't get access to anything you can do on a PC. So it's not a like for like at all, but it's certainly an option to consider. I also have here the new ROG 7 Ultimate phone as well, so that's also an option. This is a fantastic device. Again, not for PC gaming, it's mobile gaming, but this is a brilliant device for ASUS. It's really well made. I am doing a review on this as well, so make sure you keep an eye on the channel for that when it comes through. And here is something I haven't reviewed yet, but it's been sent to me. This is Backbone. I sent this through. So that is a mobile device turned into a controller. So that also just takes something like this and puts into something like that. The reason why I bring these up is because this is $12.99 here in Australia, like I said, and if you're going to invest that kind of money into a device at this kind of stage in its lifespan, or its first generation, they're still going to come into grips with it, then you're really going to be on the niche side of the audience, I think. And for most general consumers, for this thing to kind of hit its spot and go mainstream, it needs to solve that UI issue, it needs to solve that kind of UI balance issue and that connectivity and user friendliness issue, as well as improve the battery life to have any mainstream success. In the meantime, you've got devices like the Switch here, or a device that you just might have every single day, such as your existing mobile phone. This is I think $2,000 here in Australia, so it's a fair bit more expensive than this, but it's also your phone. So there's definitely options to play with. So that's where I think that the ROG Ally sits currently as of the middle of July 2023, and where it's at. It's good when it's good, it's just not when it's not. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Stead. Until next time, you.